So I've opened up Subdivisions here. We're going to start off this. We have a lot to cover, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by showing you how to model some low-res in-game assets here. Stuff from the environment that I created, that warehouse scene. So let me show you. Let's open up an example scene here. I'm going to open up the example cables. Okay, so basically what we have here is the cables that I did in that warehouse scene that we saw earlier. There's a couple of examples. We have this kind of thick hanging cable here that has some wires that are cut here. They're exposed, so the cable's been cut and these wires are exposed and they're kind of frayed and just kind of sticking out in random kind of natural ways. Then we have these hanging cables, which are great for placing them on the ceiling or something like that. And if you look at them from different angles, they look very natural the way they drape down and just hang from the ceiling. So it's 4 of them that are kind of grouped up together that way. Okay, and you can do different kinds of cables, and this really helps to sell your environment. If you have some kind of industrial environment, even a sci-fi environment inside a spaceship or something like that, you might want to have cables or something that kind of just accent the environment, just add that extra pop to it and make it more immersive for the player. Okay, so let me show you how to do something like this. I'm going to open up the Explorer view over here, and let me go to the front view. I'm going to take these cables here and I'm going to hide them, and I'm going to create a brand new cable from scratch. So I'll go over here to the model menu. I'm going to go to create curve, and I'm going to draw cubic by CVs. This will allow us to draw a nice soft curve, which we can then use to create our cable. Okay, so basically create the curve profile whichever way you want. So I'm going to do it like this. If I go over to the right view, you can see that the curve is flat because I drew this on a 2D plane. So it's going to be flat on this side, but that's not a problem. I'm going to go to point mode, select all the points in the middle. I'm going to go to deform. I'm going to go to randomize, and I'm going to randomize this in the z-axis. So you can see as I increase this in the z-axis, I can make this look a little bit more natural. It's just faster than going in there and moving points by hand, which would take much too long to do. So now we can see it as I look around this curve. It looks pretty natural the way it just kind of drapes down. So it got some nice curvature to it. The next step would be to add some actual geometry to this because it's just a curve right now, and that's not going to do us any good. So let's go to primitive over here, and let's go to polygon mesh, and I'm going to create a disk. Okay, I'm going to take the subdivisions for the V down to 1. Subdivisions in the U shouldn't be 8. That's a little bit too high for this, since this is just a background prop. I'm going to set the subdivisions to 6, which will be more than enough to let the player know that this is a round kind of cable object. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the inner radius. Let me drop that down. Let me take the outer radius and make this pretty small. Something like this will probably look pretty good. And I want to place this on top of the curve up there. So I'm going to use the move tool and make sure that in my snap settings I have point mode turned on. So let me take this guy and snap him up here. And what I want to do here is just kind of orient it to the curve right there, so it's kind of pointing or facing down the curve. You don't have to do that, but it tends to look a lot better when we extrude it. And now that that's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those border edges that are right there in that middle, that kind of hole that's right there, and I'm going to seal that up by hitting Control and Delete on the keyboard. That'll just go ahead and collapse that geometry. Okay, let me close that. Let me also take these polygons, and I'm going to invert them simply because they're kind of facing the wrong way. So I want them to face, the normals to face down the curve. So with those polys selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to extrude along curve, and I'm going to select the curve we've created. And as you can see, we have ourselves the beginnings of a cable. What we need to do is add more subdivisions. By default right now we only have 1 subdivision here, so we need to increase this. But if I increase this, it's adding subdivisions uniformly across the entire object or a cable. That's not what I want. So what I want to do is I want to turn on this option here called per knot in Subdivisions, which allows us to focus more geometry in areas that have a lot of points on the curve that we drew. Okay, so basically it ends up creating more points around these curvy areas. So we can go with something like maybe 1 or 2 looks pretty good. May have to add more geometry there and optimize this a little bit more. So I'm going to go with 2. 2 looks pretty decent for now, so I'm going to close that. You can see up here this looks pretty blocky. We don't have a lot of geometry in this area right here. So what I'll do is I'm just going to take this edge loop that's right here. Alright, and I'm going to go to bevel. I'm going to bevel that just so that we have a little bit more geometry right there, just so it looks a little bit better in that area. Okay, so that looks a lot better. And we also have areas that have a little bit too much geometry, but we'll optimize that later. Right now what I want to do is I want to add the detail down here, the exposed cables, and there's a few ways you can go about that. Let me show you a quick and easy technique to iterate this a lot faster. Okay, I'm going to select all of these polys that are down here. We're going to reuse these. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the inset polygons command. And you can see if I change the inset amount, I get something like this. That's not what I want. What I want to do is I want to take off the merge option. So I have these individual polys. I'm going to hold down shift while I do this so it's a little bit easier to control. So I'm going to make some polys about something like this. Okay. Now I can take one of these polygons and I can go to extrude along axis, and it's going to extrude this for me. Now we have some really good options here in the extrude op that we can use to make this look a little bit different. So by default it looks something like this, which obviously doesn't look very good. So what we can do is we can add a few subdivisions to this, and we can change the inset amount to kind of thin this out at the end like this. And then we can go to the transform panel over here, and we can use the rotate parameters to rotate this and make this look a little bit more natural. So I could rotate this out like this. I could kind of twist it up. So I can rotate this a bunch of different ways. So something like this. I can extrude this a little bit further if I want this to look a little bit longer. I can take another polygon over here. I can extrude it along axis. And what I can do here is add a few more subdivisions. So by using this really awesome extrude op tool, I can extrude this and then give it some very natural looking curvature to make it look just a little bit more natural, make it look a little bit better. So something like this. You can increase the subdivisions if you wanted to. The very powerful feature inside of Subdivisions that allows you to do some complex modeling tasks and some mundane modeling tasks and make this work a lot easier on you. So I could take this polygon, I'm going to do the same thing. So it's basically more of the same. It's just kind of a rinse and repeat sort of idea here. Now we have this cable that kind of hangs down, and then at the end it's cut, and there's these exposed wires that are kind of just sticking out right there. And you put this in an environment in the background, and it'll just help to immerse the player and make the environment more believable. Let's optimize this mesh a little bit. It's got a little bit too much geometry, more than what we actually need. So I'm going to identify some edge loops that we don't need and start to delete them, simply because we have a little bit too much. So just look at the model and delete edge loops that really don't define the shape or the silhouette of the object. So an edge loop like say this one right here really defines that curve right there, so I don't want to get rid of that or else it's going to look very faceted and blocky. This edge loop right here really is not defining much, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that, and it's not going to hurt the shape too much, if at all. So you want to get rid of some of this geometry that really is sitting there doing nothing. It's pretty much useless, and it's just a waste of resources. So I'll freeze modeling on that, and there we go. We've got ourselves a cable. So I'm going to end this video here, and in the next one I'll show you another example of hanging cables.